Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to our conversation on not Saber's latest book. I think they've got one right after that, but very, very good book from Rube to Robinson. And I'm about halfway through the book. I've been really enjoying it. So thank you guys for joining. And today we have John Graf and Duke Goldman, who participated in the book. John was the editor on that, and they're going to talk about it. But before we get started, I'd like to do some of my usual questions. And John's well aware of them from being in some of our other meetings. But so I'm going to start with you, John. What is your earliest baseball memory?
Well, I grew up collecting baseball cards like a lot of people. And also I grew up wanting to be a writer. I wanted to write a book when I was 6 years old. So I took my baseball cards and I drew pictures from them, copied data from the cards, wound up with 80 pages worth of it, including a drawing of Minnie Minoso, who was a Negro Leagues player, not at that time, but before he reached the major leagues, and called it my sports page. And so I loved baseball card collecting and also writing from the get-go. I noticed reading Baseball Digest as a kid that they would designate the ethnicity of players in the rookie scouting reports that they had every year. And so I would see the word Negro there, and my favorite players were people like Willie Mays and Henry Aaron. And so I was drawn to this, and our dictionary at home as a kid listed the colleges and universities of the United States, and it designated the historic Black colleges as Negro. And so I would look at football rosters from Street and Smith's football yearbook and see those college names and start making up imaginary teams of baseball, football, and basketball players, largely populated by some of those players from those schools. Discovered Stratomatic baseball when I was a kid, and then many years later, picked up the game again when Scott Simkus, who I think most of us know, developed a Negro Leagues component to the famous board and computer game. I had a copy of James Riley's biographical encyclopedia of the Negro Leagues, started forming imaginary teams again. This was about 2009. And the players came to life, kind of like the players coming out of the cornfield in Field of Dreams. And so I discovered SABR, joined its Negro Leagues research committee, attended some conferences, participated in the trivia, or as we call it, the significant contest, and then was helping to organize the 2020 conference, which unfortunately was canceled. But at the same time, the idea for this book came up, and so I didn't write it, but I was proud to have been involved.
And thank you for being involved. Duke, what is your earliest baseball memories?
Well, I was 7 years old at school in the Bronx, and I heard people talking about this entity called the New York Mets. And I didn't know what the New York Mets were, but all I heard was everybody saying, the Mets, the Mets, the Mets are in first place. And somehow I knew that was good, even though I didn't know what baseball was. But when the Mets finally actually got to the World Series, I saw my first baseball game on TV, and it was game 2 of the 1969 World Series, a game that Jerry Koosman won 2-1, and he pitched a no-hitter through 6 innings. But I remember at 7 years old, when I got to the end of that game, I thought, boy, was that dull. Nothing happened. So my initial awareness was a little bit like, what is this game? But by the next year, I was just a diehard Mets fan, and even though I was from the Bronx, and just got into baseball from there, more and more.
It helped starting with your team going to the World Series. Not quite my earliest memories, but close to my earliest memories of the '57 Braves. And I remember it more as the Asiatic flu had hit Milwaukee. My whole family was sick the entire time, including my dad, who never missed work. And I always said we basically got up, threw up, watched the ball game, threw up, went back to bed, and waited for the next ball game. That's what I remember mostly about. But that 57 World Series resonates very strongly. The other question that I usually ask, and I'm not going to, is who is your favorite ball player? I want to change it up a little and ask how you became interested in the Negro Leagues. And Duke, if you'd start that question. And what's your particular area of interest?
So the way I got started, I had read, like so many SABR members, read about the Negro Leagues, read about all sorts of areas of baseball. So I had a few books at home. But in 2012, one of our local area museums had an exhibit of the paintings of Kadir Nelson, all of which appeared in his book, We Are the Ship, the children's book on Negro League baseball. And somebody asked me to do a gallery tour of the museum. And at the same time, I was involved in another baseball project. And the person who got me involved in that, he had deputized a local citizen where I live in Western Mass to talk at this same museum when we had when I was doing the gallery talk. We also had a presentation that Sharon Robinson, Jackie's daughter, was involved in, and Kadir Nelson was involved in, but also this guy named Ray Elliott, who is a veteran of World War II, an African-American, and he talked about the Double Victory campaign, the campaign that many people say was the larger theme under which baseball integration happened. When I then did the gallery tour and talked about these, I don't know if you folks have seen We Are the Ship. I highly recommend the book to you. It's just an amazing book, and the paintings are larger than life. They're so vivid. I fell in love with the topic, and hearing about the Double Victory campaign, I also realized that baseball and the Double Victory campaign had a connection. And in addition to that, I had contacted Jim Overmeyer, who at that time lived in Western Massachusetts, to ask him about Effa Manley, a painting of her was in that exhibit. And Jim came to my talk, and then I quickly after that visited him, heard about his research on Effa Manley, looked at some of his files, and for me, that was it. I just got caught up into the stream of doing Negro League research and research on Black baseball. So it's a baseball integration. And then later on, Monty Irvin, who I'm currently working on a biography of.
I muted myself. I was printing out the list of attendees for the book drawing, and I didn't want to make all the noise while printing. That's a good topic for autobiography. I'd like to see that too. John, where did your interest from the Negro Leagues come from?
Well, I think I touched on that a little bit. I would say that my interest has deepened significantly as a result of joining SABR and being part of the Negro Leagues Research Committee. The organization and the committee are so welcoming and encouraging a rookie person in this area of research that I just can't say enough about both the committee and the organization as a whole. And so when my childhood interests matched with what is going on in the research world, I was hooked.
Yeah, good. Got a list of questions here I'd like to ask, and starting out with you, John, do you want to give us your thoughts behind why the compiling of the articles from Rube to Robinson, and give us a quick tour of the book?
Yeah, I can run through the table of contents quickly. We start out with Todd Peterson, who is also an editor of a very timely book, The Negro Leagues Were Major Leagues. And Todd writes about the early years of blackball championships from 1866 to 1923, I think. And then we've got the late Jerry Malloy, who's the namesake of our Negro Leagues conference, writing about one of the early attempts to form a league. Profiles several Black baseball notables, including Sal White, Rube Foster, John Donaldson, Oscar Charleston. The eminent historian John Hallway and the late Dick Clark are part of our table of contents, with a snapshot of the 1921 season, including a sidebar that describes some of the early efforts to develop an authoritative statistical record of Negro Leagues baseball. We have articles on a couple different stadiums of note. Jim Overmeyer wrote about Yankee Stadium and its connection with the Negro Leagues. Jerry Driscoll Strecker wrote about the stadium in Pittsburgh, Greenlee Field, which was built by Gus Greenlee and is, of course, a historic landmark in Negro League baseball that unfortunately was demolished. We've got then the issue of integration covered with Larry Lester writing about Judge Landis and the social movement, literal social movement that developed to encourage baseball to integrate. And Larry's article is called "Can You Read Judge Landis?", which was a headline in the radical press at the time that encouraged integration. Then we've got John Thorne and the late Jules Tigel on Jackie Robinson's sighting, and they did some important detective work some years back on the lead up to the signing of Robinson. Brian Carroll writes about the Black press and how it viewed players and owners as heroic figures at various times in the history of the Negro Leagues. And of course, there's Duke's exhaustive treatment of the winter and in-season meetings of Negro League baseball. We've got a case study of Kansas City and integration's effects on its baseball and the community as a whole. And then our closer is Dave Malarcher, the former baseball player and manager with the Chicago American Giants, who wrote a poetic tribute to Oscar Charleston late in his life. And so that's what we've got.
And for those who haven't seen the book yet, so this is the book. I'm about halfway through it. Between a book club and this, I've had fun reading, but this book has been very, very good. You mentioned Jules Tigel and Thorne. Jules Tigel's book, I think, is one of the best books on Jackie Robinson. I'm always recommending that book out to anyone who's interested in that. So I agree. At the beginning of the book, Larry had an article about the editorial decisions that were being made that I never even thought about, but changed. So it's Black baseball. Black is now capitalized. I always saw him as colors, white and black. So I would never even thought of it, but his reasoning for it was very sound, and trying to avoid the use of the word organized baseball. Can you talk a little about that?
Sure. Larry came to us, as we were doing this editorial process, and we had lots of ongoing discussions. And he said, write a piece. We have a piece in our book on it, a short piece describing why he thought we should capitalize both black and white. And it goes back to a decision made in 1930 based on a recommendation by W.E.B. Du Bois that at that time, the common word Negro be capitalized. And based on what Du Bois said, it was decided to capitalize Negro as an act of recognition of racial respect for those who have been generations in the, quote, lowercase. Larry was saying at this point, he felt that both should be capitalized. And he said capitalizing Black was an act of recognition and of racial respect, and that all terms of people's race and origin should be capitalized. But this is now kind of a bone of contention. The Associated Press decided in July of 2020 only to capitalize Black and not to capitalize white. They said that white people generally do not share the same history and culture, and or the experience of being discriminated against because of skin color, and therefore also capitalizing the term white, which is done by white supremacists, risks subtly conveying legitimacy to such beliefs. So there is actually a division because the New York Times, the AP, Wall Street Journal, they're capitalizing Black and not white, but Larry and us, the National Association of Black Journalists, AMA style, APA style, they're capitalizing both. And the argument there is that if you don't capitalize white, you're implying that white is the common term, white is the default. So this is going to play out over time. Like so many controversies in our society, it is not decided. But we decided that it was worth going through all of the articles and capitalizing, which is a painstaking process. The other point Larry made was,
when I see white capitalized, it seems weird to me. Not Black. I understand, but but that's a very interesting conversation. Go on. I'm sorry. Didn't mean to really interrupt too much there. Sorry.
no, that's fine. And I welcome that conversation. And I think people ought to have that conversation. That's the way we figure out in our culture, you know, how do we respect history? How do we respect people? And so Larry's other point was that the term organized baseball was disrespectful to Black baseball, talking about Black baseball in comparison to white, quote unquote, organized baseball. Because what does it clearly imply? That Black baseball was disorganized. And in point of fact, and I know this so well, especially from working months and months on my article on the Negro Leagues business meetings, the Black baseball entities were organized. They had regular meetings. They had minutes of their meetings. They had bylaws and a constitution. And contrary to the lie perpetuated by Branch Rickey, they had written contracts. I did research and went into Effa Manley's files, which are available at the Newark Public Library, and they had copies of the written contracts of all her players. So Black baseball was organized without a doubt, and Larry thought that therefore we should work to eliminate this common usage of organized baseball as a contrast to Black baseball.
Yeah, that made all the sense in the world. Although I sometimes use the word organized baseball more as a negative because I don't really think Major League Baseball is all that well organized. They're good at hiding their head in the sand, you know, gambling, steroids, you know, they don't look that organized, but Larry's 100% correct that for the reasoning on that term. Any questions or comments, anybody on that would like to discuss that?
Well, for what it's worth, this is Dan, just real quickly, I always look at the term organized baseball, I guess, in contrast to things like the Federal League or the Continental League, and as a way to describe baseball that includes the minors. So you know, we need some other term then that can refer to that entity or those entities.
Yeah.
And my understanding is that that's part of the agenda of SABR and its Negro Leagues task force that was just put together, that this is an ongoing challenge that we'll need to come to grips with as a historical organization.
Yeah. You know, and Larry had that introduction into the book, and then his article, Can You Read Judge Lantis? Really very, very powerful. It really strikes home and proves without a doubt that Landis did everything possible to prevent Black players from playing in not only the white major leagues, but the even having white and Black players play each other. He was dead set against it. And Larry makes a very strong case for it. And And he closed his article with the quote, "Some say that Judge Landis and Babe Ruth changed baseball. Others believe two men with one voice, Branch Rickey and Jackie Robinson, changed America." That article was written in 2008, and it took to 2020 before any action was taken. And I hate using the word the major leagues recognizing, because who are they to make that decision? But it took all those years for before any type of action was taken. Why? So.
Major Leagues takes a long time to do so many different things. Look how long it took them to integrate in the first place. Look how long it took the Boston Red Sox to finally have an African-American ball player. They drag their feet so often, I think.
Yep. Duke, while you're there, you had a heck of an article on the Negro League business meetings. It's the longest article in the book, and you deservedly earned the 2018 McFarland SABR Baseball Research, named the Baseball Research winner for the work that you put into that. I know from doing some Negro League research, trying to find games and things is difficult. I can't imagine how you found anything on what you were researching. Can you talk a little about that?
Sure. Well, actually, when I was writing the article, I was kind of drowning in material, because you'd be surprised how much there is. And there were three main sources. The first was, as I referred to earlier, Effa Manley's files. Effa Manley of fame, and Effa, as the co-owner of the Newark Eagles, had kept years and years of correspondence and also minutes of the business meetings of Negro League Baseball. And by just a felicitous circumstance, years after she had left her house in New Jersey and had moved to California, when somebody else was selling the house, they found a cabinet with all of that material in, I think it was the attic. And it was then donated to the Newark Public Library, and Negro Leagues researchers and researchers on black ball have been using it for years. I had already looked at it previously for another article, and when I got this assignment, I knew that was one place to go. So that started me out with a treasure trove of material. The second source is some of the great books that had already been produced before I started this work, and in particular, the book called, I believe it was called Negro League Baseball by Neil Lanctot, Lanctot, and he had done a voluminous work on the business of Negro League Baseball and cited to so many articles in the black press. That got me to the black press. And here, the rest of the research, along with some other other secondary sources, was the black press itself, and doing searches through ProQuest to read articles of the time, contemporary, in the New York Amsterdam News, Baltimore Afro-American, Chicago Defender, Pittsburgh Courier, Atlanta Daily World, about 15 or so different newspapers I was able to access. And those newspapers covered these business meetings quite thoroughly. So I actually had, in the end, I did 30 years of business meetings, and I was looking at 30 years of material on these meetings, oftentimes 3, 4, 5 different articles on the same meetings. And I also realized pretty early on that in the Negro Leagues, a lot of times they had a need for meetings all throughout the year. They were really, it's not that they were disorganized, but they were besieged. They were operating on a shoestring quite often. They had a lot of conflict. They had a lot of difficulty getting dates in stadiums. So they were constantly putting out fires, and they were meeting all the time. And I realized, to really tell a chronicle, I've got to go not just to the winter meetings, but meetings that went on throughout the year. And so all of that material meant it really ended up being a labor of love. It took me a good portion of a year to write this article.
Yeah, I just started reading it, and I'm always fascinated on the business side of things anyhow, having been a CEO of a credit union and always delving into business issues. So that is always an area that, so so I've just started reading it, and I'm looking forward to finishing it this weekend. So, yes.
Cool.
Yeah. Any questions for
A great article.
on that? Yeah, Dan.
No, it's a great article. I mean, I love the winter meeting stuff, and it's really a truly great article, Duke.
Yeah. Good.
Thank you.
One of the things that I like about Duke's article is the range of years that it covers, and gives us a bridge from the first Negro National Leagues, which started in 1920. Duke starts out with the second Negro National League formation in the early 1930s. And it lasts all the way through the end of the Negro American League in the early 1960s. And so that period of time after 1948, when the cutoff of Negro Leagues as major leagues has been kind of arbitrarily drawn, is covered in that article. And I'm wondering, Duke, if you want to talk a little bit about some of the post-integration coverage that you discovered concerning the meetings after Jackie Robinson was signed.
Well, yeah, sure. One thing was there were meetings fast and furious from I'd say late October 1945 through most of the 1946 meetings. I found more minutes than ever before in that roughly a year's period of time, because the owners knew their goose was cooked. I mean, they were savvy business people, and they knew, I believe, at that point, we're going to struggle to survive. So they were trying to figure out, what can we do? And one of the things they had already been working on was getting recognition from Major League Baseball. So they quickly turned to that. Their viewpoint was, how can we get Major League Baseball to take us into the system of leagues that they had, to be affiliated? And so they were meeting and strategizing and figuring out, how are we going to keep this going? So there was a lot of that going on. And then what happened was, of course, as soon as Jackie Robinson got into the major leagues in 1947, the Black press turned most of its coverage over to the major leagues, and attendance dropped significantly. And by 1948, and by the end of the year 1948, the Negro National League was done. And there were a few meetings discussing how they could try to keep it together, but in the end, rather quickly, in I think it was October, November of 1948, they ceased to exist. But here's where, again, we as researchers have to deal with misinformation. There are lots of people out there that think that right after Jackie Robinson, the Negro Leagues died. And in fact, they existed another 15 years, because the Negro Leagues reformulated. A few of the teams in the Negro National League joined the Negro American League, and starting in 1949, there were still 10 teams in the Negro American League. And so at that point, the coverage was less in the Black press, but I still found lots of discussions, often simply about, how are we going to keep it going? What can we do to keep fans out there interested? What new avenues can we explore in order to survive? And the Negro American League president kept doing what I would call whistling in the dark. He kept saying, we're having our best year. This was J.B. Martin. He'd say and I'd read this in the press or in the minutes, we just had our best year ever. Well, they weren't having their best year ever. They were struggling. They were quickly down from 10 teams to 4 teams by the early 1950s. But they did continue straggling on. And believe it or not, they still had an East-West All-Star game in 1962, which really was the last event of Negro League Baseball, 15 years after Jackie's debut.
I was remiss in mentioning at the top of this, one of the co-editors, Larry Lester, was unable to join us. His mother passed away in the last few weeks, and he's very, very busy with taking care of the estate and things. So it's unfortunate for Larry to lose his mother, and he would have been able to add a lot to this as well. So at some future date, I'm sure he'll give us some information on some of his thoughts on this. But reading the book, he makes a good statement in several spots. How do you guys feel the major league recognition is going to change Black baseball, and how's it going to, even looking at how players are recognized for the Hall of Fame? Do you have a feeling on that? Duke or John?
John?
Oh, go ahead, Duke.
John, you want to handle that?
I can give it a start.
Yeah.
I think in the SABR Day discussion the Milwaukee chapter had with Larry Lester and Mark Armour and Scott Simkus and Sean Gibson, they talked a little bit about that sort of thing. And one of the things that was discussed was the statistics. And a question that I have is just how will the statistics be combined in databases? And it's not clear to me. There are others who are more well-versed in how that's going to play out. But one of the things that Scott Simkus mentioned during that previous discussion was that that all through baseball, there have been rule changes and other factors that have made the statistics less of a, maybe a sacred part of the game than it might appear on the surface. And that, for instance, comparing Cap Anson to Mike Trout or Barry Bonds or Wade Boggs just is a kind of an apples to oranges comparison these days. And so in some senses, I'm not sure which of the panelists talked about it, but they said that everything has an asterisk. And so the upshot of that, from Scott's perspective, if I'm quoting him accurately, is that these sort of absurdities in trying to compare eras and trying to match up the stats are something that are going to have to be sorted out by historians. And Mark Armour was making a similar point. And so when you have these numbers side by side, what's it going to look like for Major League Baseball as a historical entity? Is that going to make them look good, or is it going to make them look bad? And Scott's point was that it's going to appear as a scarlet letter on the surface of Major League Baseball, and that that's the legacy that it is going to have to deal with. That it's an illustration of what was going on in this country at the time that the Negro Leagues were in existence, and that it's just something that is there for historians to continue to grapple with. And I guess I don't have any hard and fast answers on it.
I kind of wish that Major League Baseball had allowed the SABR historians to do their work before they ran out there and made their announcement. I think Major League Baseball was dealing with their scarlet letter in the way they know how, which is to whitewash the past, make a pronouncement. And, that pronouncement is designed to make them look good. What they don't want to do is acknowledge the racist past. It's not Major League Baseball that makes the plaques, but my fervent desire is to see Judge Landis's plaque changed, and to put on his plaque a phrase like implacable foe of integration, because that's who he was. I've heard people say, well, Cooperstown doesn't change plaques, but they have changed plaques in the past. In fact, they changed Jackie Robinson's plaque, because originally Jackie Robinson's plaque said nothing about him integrating baseball. So especially, I think it would make sense for them to do that. And it would make sense for Major League Baseball to be a partner in recognizing this terrible aspect of their past. But instead, what they've decided to do is open a can of worms to a situation that nobody really knows what to do now. I think for the general public, the idea of declaring the Negro Leagues as Major League is a way to raise the Negro Leagues profile. It has a positive impact in that respect. Maybe more people will hear about the Negro Leagues and even learn about it because of it. So I'm thrilled about that. But what are they going to do about the knotty question of, do you include Willie Mays' one home run with the 1948 Birmingham Black Barons and change his total of home runs, but not include Hank Aaron's home runs with the Indianapolis Clowns? Because as they've currently decided, they are not including Negro American League games as major league games starting after the end of the Negro National League. And Hank Aaron did not play in the Negro Leagues until the 50s. So now they have a whole mess to deal with.
Well, and then we also have the question about who threw no hitters on opening day. Oh, we have more than one. Who was the last 400 hitter? That changes. It will be interesting. I think SABR is going to do a lot of work on this to try and help point in a direction, but that doesn't mean Major League Baseball is going to follow, unfortunately. So, John, one of the things that we started doing, Mary, who's our head of our book club, is show and tell. And in the back of your, behind you, it looks like you have a poster or something from a Negro League game. I can't quite make it out. Can you tell us, give us a show and tell item behind you?
Yeah. What I did was I took books from my library and put them in a photocopier and photocopied the covers. And so you can see the cover of Larry Lester's book on the East-West All-Star game that was just reissued, by the way. And next to Larry's book is Leslie Heafy's history of the Negro Leagues. A little further to the side is Todd Peterson's book, The Negro Leagues Were Major Leagues. And so I just put together a large poster consisting of those book covers. And it was a lot of fun. I knew that if I was going to do these Zoom presentations, I needed to clean up my act a little bit in terms of having a background that was presentable. And so that's what I came up with. There are about 20 different book covers on the poster. I don't know if I can configure things in a way to get all that onto the screen here, but that's what it is.
I think I've watched too many TV shows using Zoom because I'm always watching backgrounds and looking at backgrounds, and Linda and I always are making comments on backgrounds. I think we're getting a little sick on it, but I really liked what I'm seeing there, so I had to make a comment.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. I'm looking at chat. So far, nobody has a question out there on chat. Any questions from anybody out there?
Duke, can you talk a little bit about the F. Manley papers and sort of what's in them and any sort of, I mean, obviously there was a lot in them, but just nuggets or any, what are the one or two of the more interesting things you found in them that, were not common knowledge?
Well, that's a good question. I mean, her papers ran from about 1938 to 1946. So it wasn't the entire run that she had owned the Newark Eagles, but it was most of it. And there was just compendious letters. I mean, she wrote letters to, there was a tremendous amount of communication with Eddie Gottlieb, who was one of the white booking agents and doubled as the owner of the Philadelphia Warriors basketball team. And what you saw in these letters were really they worked together, but they contended with each other. So a lot of times she was writing to Gottlieb and saying, why are you charging so much money? Why can't I get a date that I'm looking for? Why is this stadium not available? Or she wrote a lot with her fellow owners. So there was a whole slew of letters with Cumberland Posey back and forth. And she had in her files not only her own letters, she had a lot of the responses. And some of the language in it was pretty insulting between the two of them. So it was really quite interesting to read how personal they could get, but then there'd be another letter a week or two later and it was like nothing had happened. So that was their interaction. So you learned a lot, not just about their practical dealings, but also their personalities.
Good question, Dan. Other questions?
I've got a question about the stats. We were talking about a little while ago. Let me start by saying that when I was a kid, I admired Henry Aaron and Willie Mays every bit as much as Mickey Mantle and Ted Williams. In fact, probably even more so now, because Willie Mays and Henry Aaron had to do what they did and still remain civil in our eyes, where there were things about the antics of Ted Williams and Mickey Mantle that are questionable now. But anyway, I just wanted to tell you that.
We're not hearing you, David. Did you mute there?
Sorry. Can you hear me?
Yeah, now we can.
Sorry to waste your time. But anyway, when I was a kid, I admired Henry Aaron and Willie Mays just as much as I did Ted Williams and Mickey Mantle, for example, because not only were they excellent players, but then they had to be extra civil, which Mays and Mantle always weren't. But I just wanted you to know that about me before I ask my question. And that is, the question on stats is, when the Negro Leagues began, were the stats kept just as immaculately as they were kept for the white major leagues? That's the first part of the question. And then secondly, I've heard testimonials about black baseball players, especially at one SABR convention in Chicago years ago, where they had a couple of ex-Negro leaders. The stories that these Negro leaguers told about other players in their league seemed puffed up a little bit. And maybe we tend to do that for all of our favorite baseball players. But for example, if you hear someone talk about the qualities of and the abilities of Bo Jackson, you might assume that he'd be in the Hall of Fame, but he's not. And how much are some of these stories of major leaguers puffed up, if they are?
Duke or John, you want to handle that one?
John?
Well, it's difficult to say. Backing up to your first question, I think that the black teams of the 19th century and early 20th century did the best they could to keep statistics, and there's an ongoing effort to uncover more of that. Sometimes the teams just had enough players to put on the field and no one extra to keep a scorebook. Sometimes the local papers, well, maybe a lot of the time, local papers didn't cover the doings of the early black teams. And so I think they did the best they could. Yeah.
So what I'll add to that is, now most of my research starts in the 30s, so I didn't look much before that. One thing to be aware of is almost all of the black press published weekly, not daily. So they weren't publishing daily box scores. A lot of the time, they weren't publishing full box scores. They would be line box scores. Starting in the 30s and 40s, the Negro Leagues did hire organizations like the Howe Sports Bureau, Elias Sports Bureau, to compile stats for them. So certainly during some of those years in the Black press, there'd be not always every week, but regular reports of things like who was leading the Negro National League or the Negro American League in batting. Now, of course, recently they've uncovered more games. Seamheads.com has done amazing work with people finding more material. So some of the answers as to who won a batting title in a particular year has been changing. So there was data at certain points in the past, but not as comprehensive, let's say, as the major league data was.
Thank you. And how
John,
many games? And how many games were in a major league season for them?
Well,
It
that
varied. Go ahead, John. John, go ahead.
Oh yeah, it varied. The schedules could be as many as 90 or 100 games during the course of a season, league games, or as few as 40 some. And sometimes that had to do with the financial health of a team and whether it lasted the entire season. Sometimes it was just the way things played out in terms of all the factors that go into whether you can play a full schedule, such as the schedule that the White American and National League was playing at the time. And so travel enters into it, and a number of other factors that would give you a set of standings, for instance, that would include a team with 60 or 70 or 80 games and another one with 30 or 40 or even fewer.
Thank you.
Just with regard to your the second part of your question about whether things were embellished to a degree, I think that part of the charm of baseball is its legend and storytelling, and so there's certainly a fair amount of that in baseball in general, not just in Black baseball, going back however far you want to go. And so, yeah, there are these two aspects to it: the literal numbers that come out of the box scores and the statistical compilations, and also the myth and legend and storytelling. And it's all part of what makes the game fun and interesting. But yeah, no doubt there are some tall tales that have been told over the years.
Go
ahead, Duke.
I was just going to say there's still controversy over whether Josh Gibson actually hit a ball out of Yankee Stadium, and you'll read various people insisting that he did, and other people saying no, he didn't. And I mean, there's all those stories, just like there is about Babe Ruth's called shot. It's and it's fun to ruminate about that, and somebody could do research. I don't know if they'd ever be able to determine it definitively, but that's part of the legend of the game.
Often baseball lore going out and fact checking, it hurts because it proves it wrong, and the stories are sometimes better than what actually happened, and so but facts are more important. So yeah, so I'm sure I talked over somebody there.
Oh yeah, I was just going to mention regarding Josh Gibson. A question arises: well, how many home runs did he hit in his lifetime? And if you count league games only, then you have Mule Suttles and Turkey Stearns ahead of him in that regard. But his Hall of Fame plaque, I think, says 800 or something like that. And so that would have counted barnstorming games and a lot of non-league action, some of it against semi-pro teams, local teams, varying levels of competition. And so that points to the need for us as historians to figure out, well, how are we going to interpret these numbers? And what does it mean when Josh Gibson has 180 some home runs or however many it is in league play, as opposed to Babe Ruth's 714 or Aaron's 755 or numbers that we know well from the fact that they're iconic mileposts in terms of the statistical record. So for me, in addition to the records and the leaderboards, the records that have to do with average players are just as significant in many ways. And Larry Lester last month in the discussion that you all had with Milwaukee SABR mentioned that there were a lot of players in the Negro Leagues who hit below the Mendoza line. And we need to figure out a way to make sure that we're interpreting things in a way that honors those players for what they did, whether they struck out or whether they hit a home run.
Yep. We have about 8 minutes to go here. So before we run out of time, I want to do the drawing. I said that anyone who attended would be eligible to have a hard copy of the book. If you have a copy of the book, let me know. We'll redraw and we'll send you a different book of your choice. But I'd like to get this book in somebody's hand. So, John, you can make a friend or lose 15 quickly here. Would you pick a number between 1 and 16 to see who wins a copy of the book?
Oh, 13.
13. Congratulations, Mary Eastland. Do you have the book? Still out here?
Oh, you're muted, Mary.
Yeah, Mary's muted.
Okay, thank you. I do not have the book.
Well, and you're a SABR member, I assume?
Actually, Mary's my sweetie.
Maybe I should have John pick another number because I'll get the book eventually.
Oh, okay. Well, John, try again.
Okay, let's go with 4.
4. Dixie. Dixie, are you still out here?
Dixie, you're muted.
Yeah.
I have it already.
Yes, he's muted.
Okay. Well, is there something else you'd like us to send you, Dixie?
Not with the pile I have now, no.
God, do I know that feeling. Okay, well, we'll just keep delving through here. John, try again.
All right, how about the square root of 4?
2. God, that's you. No.
Oh, that's me?
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. How about 5?
5. Bob Russin out in Oregon.
Bob has it.
Bob has it?
Yep.
Okay.
Thanks,
Who
I've already
doesn't have
got
the
it.
book, maybe.
Okay.
No, thanks, I've already got it. I'm holding it up here.
Well, this is good news. So many people have the books. I guess that's encouraging. Well, just keep throwing out a number.
Okay, 15.
15. Bob Komorowski.
You can send me the book. I do not have it.
Oh, and you're a SABR member and your profile is up to date with everything, so I can send it to you there?
Yep, just look on my profile. The address is correct. So send it. Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate your joining us today. We've got about 5 minutes. Real quick, are there any other books, articles, or things, John or Duke, that you would recommend? I know in the back of the book there's a few things that are listed But anything that you would recommend?
One thing I would recommend is a book that came out called Negro Leagues and the Hall of Fame. It's by an author named Stephen Greenis. And the subtitle is The Case for Inducting 24 Overlooked Ball Players. It was an education for me, write-ups on many ball players I knew just a little bit about who have very compelling cases. So I would highly recommend this book.
What's the author's name on that?
Stephen Greenis, Greenes, and it's a McFarland 2020 book.
Okay. John or anybody else?
Well, I've got a whole list that I can sprint through because what we have from Rube to Robinson is kind of the tip of the iceberg of a lot of his important historians. So a number of Larry Lester's books are really, really important to pick up if you're interested in this subject. He's got a biography of Rube Foster, as we mentioned before, a history of the East-West All-Star Game, the original Negro Leagues book, a history of the first Colored World Series. John Holway's interviews were the basis of a couple of real important early histories. Jeremy Beer wrote an award-winning biography of Oscar Charleston. Jim Overmeyer, who's in our book, wrote about Effa Manley, and most recently about Cumberland Posey, the Atlantic City Backrack Giants is another of his subjects. James Brunson, whose painting is in our book, has a 3-volume history of 19th century black baseball that's just fascinating, and also the early image of black baseball, about how baseball and African Americans were depicted in the press. As I think was mentioned before, Todd Peterson's The Negro Leagues Were Major Leagues, Jules Tygel's Baseball's Great Experiment. John Thorne's got a body of work that is second to none. Brian Carroll has written a couple books about the press and black baseball. And so, you know, I would be willing to share this list with anybody who's interested in it. Like I said, our book is the tip of the iceberg, and we're really fortunate to have had an opportunity to kind of get the ball rolling on collecting some important authors and a wide range of subjects.
John, I will, if you send me that list, I will put that in the newsletter. And I'll make sure everybody who's on here, if they're not on our newsletter list, I will make sure that you get a copy of the newsletter so you can pick that up. I don't think Dixie's a member of the chapter, but I'll get that out.
Great idea. Thank you.
Yeah, and then I got some of these others. We're at about a minute or two to go. Any last words of wisdom or any big question out there? Yes.
I heard somebody mention the Negro Leagues Hall of Fame or the museum just before the meeting started. There is one thing very wrong with the Negro Leagues Museum. It was wrong 15 years ago, and it's still wrong now, and Larry Lester agrees with me. They have no yearbook. How can this be possible to have no yearbook for a museum? You cannot invite people to a museum, tell them they cannot take pictures of anything in the museum, and then have nothing for them to take with them.
Or sell them.
Stupid. It is stupid economically, and it is stupid promotionally, but they have none.
The other thing that they do is I've been a member of their museum, but if I don't get an invoice, I forget to pay things. So there's been years where I have not been a member, and they never follow up on membership, which drives me crazy because if I don't have an invoice, I forget. Any other words of wisdom?
And they don't have a library. The Negro Leagues Museum does not have a library. Hard to believe.
you know, we've got SABR members who, as they're aging, are trying to get rid of books. Maybe if they have books that would be appropriate, that'd be a place to donate them.
I think they're trying to start one, but
Yeah.
that they don't have one to date, I find mystifying.
Yeah. Interesting. Cool. Well, everybody, thank you very much. John, Duke, this book is wonderful, and I appreciate your taking the time today to do this. Thank you for writing what you did, Duke. It's a really good book. I've done some Negro League research. In the last Negro League World Series, I had 2 articles in there. One, we know nothing about the player. Larry knew one thing. I got it up to 3. We still don't even know if he's alive or dead. We assume he's dead. And so it's very, very difficult following up on this stuff. So thank you guys for everything. Everyone, have a good weekend, and
Thank you.
a round of applause. Good one.
Yeah, good job, Dennis.
Thanks, Dennis.
Yeah.
Take care, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Wow.
How are you doing, Dennis?
I'm good.
Yeah,
Yeah. How about you?
pretty good. I got a vaccination finally.
Yeah. I was
I'm
gonna.
at below 65 age that.
Yeah. I missed the point on here. Don't forget, we have a book club meeting on the 31st.
Oh,
I
yeah.
forgot that. Yeah. Sorry. Yeah, my son, who's 46, just got his first shot the other day. So yeah, that's exciting. So
I'm glad you're doing well. So I'll see you on the 31st.
yes. Yeah.
Definitely. Okay.
That's another good book. I've been, between that, trying to read 2 books. So
Yeah.
Yeah.
I thought it was fascinating. I really did. All the anecdotes and information, and I thought it was great.
Yeah. And I keep hurting my elbow trying to figure out how to throw some of those pitches. So I know I'm too old to try. So I agree.
Yeah,
So-
I'd like to hear from people who have actually pitched, and
Yeah.
their view of it. Yeah. I don't know if we have any members, maybe John Stroba.
Yeah. Either
Stroba.
he's coach pitchers too. So yeah.
Yeah.
John just left, but yeah. So
Yeah. And whoever mentioned about Judge Landis, yeah, he was an adversary of women in baseball as much as Negro blacks in baseball. So I don't know. He probably shouldn't have a plaque or change the plaque. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I like that idea.
Yeah.
Well,
John,
take care.
Thank you,
I'll see you
John,
on
for
the
presenting
31st.
this idea to us. I really thank you, Mary. Good seeing you.
Nice seeing you.
Thanks, Dennis.
Yeah.
It was a good discussion. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I appreciate you bringing it to us. I was a March idea fell through about the same time you presented. I thought, oh, this is a much better idea. So this is bonus. The other one should have fallen through. So that's good. So yeah, I appreciate that.
Glad it all worked out.
Yeah, I will get that book out this week, and I'm glad we didn't have to go through all 16 numbers to find a winner. It only took 5 tries.
Yeah, and I will send you that list of books that I went through at the end.
Yeah. We should have a copy of this recording for the meeting. Matter of fact, I should probably stop that right now.